Hi, my name is Dr. Kerem Akhter and I'm Chief Medical Officer at Health-Aid. At Health-Aid, we're interested in health optimization and improving our performance in whatever we choose to do. Today, on Health-Aid Chats, I will be talking to Matt Hind and Connor Novacek from Prime Health and Performance. They have created a bespoke sports science agency that works with boxers at a national and international level, optimizing their nutrition, leading into the weigh-in, and ultimately fight night. Information in this video is relevant to boxers, martial artists, and MMA athletes. I hope you find it interesting and some valuable content about how you can optimize your nutrition to improve your performance in whatever combat sports you do. Thank you. So, all right. So, the topic I just wanted to talk to you guys about today was obviously you guys work in boxing and you worked with a few high-profile athletes. And I wanted to kind of put myself in the shoes of an athlete who would work with you, who potentially has a fight in a few weeks' time. Let's say, at the start of a boot camp. From a nutrition point of view, what is the process that you would go through to identify where that fighter is, what they need to do, and then how they progress moving forward?
I think ultimately you've got to start with their target weight, so where they've got to go to really with that essentially. So where they're at, where they want to get down to. You've then got to think about the time frame and how much they've realistically got to lose in terms of their overall body composition. We've had quite a few different fighters come to us where some might have a little bit more to lose in terms of fat loss, some might have a little less to lose, and the more you reduce their weight, the more you risk muscle mass reduction as well. So everyone is very context specific, but we can go into kind of how we break down the cycles. So you have a few initial weeks where it might be fat loss, and then those final weeks before you get into a fight, you're looking at more actual weight loss. The big thing to try and distinguish between is weight loss does not equate to fat loss all the time. What we tend to have is we have a toolkit when it comes to weight loss. We have things that we want to try and do with the athletes. So yes, fat loss is going to be optimal because they're optimizing their power to weight ratio. They're able to feel lighter on their feet. That's how we want to go about things. But let's say for instance they're 6 weeks out. Week 1 to 4 of that might be fat loss, where we're trying to get them in a calorie deficit. So we're working out the amount of calories they're consuming, the amount of calories they're burning, and we're making sure that at least 200 to 400 calories under what they need. That's going to help with our general fat loss. We're going to keep the protein intake nice and high. We'll probably keep a moderate amount of fats in there because it is good for your health to keep in your fats, because we're thinking about fat soluble vitamins and minerals that are going to be really important during those times towards the final parts of a fight camp.
And the fullness as well, because when you've got that deficit in, having certain fat options, like for instance we recommend the salmon towards the later evening. It just keeps that fullness for a little bit longer as well.
Starting point, what are the metrics that you're measuring at the outset initially?
So initially, the easiest one to measure is going to be body weight. So we can depending on how consistent they are, we from about 30 days out do like to try and get a body weight at least every other day. What we're then doing is we want to take the weekly average body weight and compare that to the weekly average body weight of the next week, because body weights in isolation don't mean much. No. We want to see that trend. It's just still over a fairly long term period. We want to look at body weight. We're then also looking into how they're feeling is actually a really big one. So we'll ask general questions and kind of rate them out of 10 when it comes to things like training, how your training feeling, like how are your energy levels, how's your fatigue. Because the last thing you want to do is bring them down too aggressively, so you've taken too many calories out of the diet so that they can't perform in training. So we're still trying to optimize that performance by getting the right balance between the amount of calories in for good training, but still burning the right amount that you're losing the fat.
And there's the science behind it, like from that perspective, but also what we like to kind of keep real with the athletes are there's certain things that the scales don't show, like Matt said, how you're feeling, the progression you're making in training, sparring, more. There's so many things that don't show, like it's a number. So what we like to already at the start is don't get fixated on the weight. Like this is what we do. Leave the weight, leave anything worrying like that to us. Because again, I mean, we're going off a different angle, but again, that's a weight off their shoulders. We say first thing in the morning, after they've been to the toilet, that's an accurate representation of where they're going to, the position they're going to be in come weight day. So what we do is we take that each morning, if we can, over the week, and we've got the trajectory from there. And that's kind of the angle we go off. We don't like to put a big emphasis on it, but it does really help when it comes to the progress. So we know, for argument's sake, if the weight isn't moving, we know that we can, for argument's sake, take maybe some carbohydrates out of the diet. But then we want to know how they're feeling when we make that decision as well. So there's things that come into play. It really is quite diverse.
And that can be as simple as just saying, how are you feeling out of 10? That can be measured from week to week. Other things, if we're lucky enough, or we can get the athletes to us, or we can travel to them, we will do body composition testing, test body fat percentage, and we can take that from the start of the camp towards midway through the camp. We do another one, check that body fat's coming down and that lean weight and muscle mass that we want to keep. So,
with body composition testing, are you doing it with calipers, or are you just doing it with machine, electronically, or just on scales or something?
So we go through calipers. So we've got the ability to go to people and offer that as a service in terms of skin fold calipers. What we do say though, if you haven't got the option or privilege to go and get that from someone, that using something like those scales from home, yes, they might not be as accurate to the absolute value of your fat mass, but you can look at it relatively. So let's say you get on, for instance, and it's 22% body fat. You can come and use the same scales, same sort of time,
in the same place,
same place, and it's reduced. Then you know that you have reduced body fat.
Okay.
Yes, it might not be the exact amount, but relatively, you know it's come down.
And I think as well, when it comes to particular fighters making particular weights, even though as a single service, for instance, we can offer that body composition analysis, that's not our limited kind of scope. We know that DEXA analysis is another option, is as accurate as you can possibly get in that respect. So if we really wanted, somebody comes to us and goes, we want to make this particular weight, and we want to make sure that they can 100% make it, and we know exactly what they're made up of. We can have a look into the kind of the finer details that skin fold calipers, other machinery won't be able to tell us. It then gives us a perfect idea of, again, what we need to do and if we can do it. Because if somebody comes to us and goes, can I make this weight? And we're like, yeah, of course we can. It's not the best situation to be in if it turns out not to be the case.
Tell me a bit more about this other analysis you were talking about. It's a dextro analysis, isn't it?
Yeah, dextro analysis. So it's not something that we necessarily possess, but it's definitely something that we have the option of using. It's essentially like a dual X-ray that, again, it's usually used for people, I mean, osteoporosis.
It's a bone density measure that then indirectly also measures body fat levels as well.
Oh, okay, yep.
But it is the gold standard within the industry of measuring body fat.
Okay.
So that would be, it'd be a really good way, to understand the amount of fat.
We had one of them.
It would, but they are hard to get hold of, and you've got certain companies like Bodyscan. We've got a link to Bodyscan.
Yeah.
And we utilise their services when we need to send an athlete there.
Yeah.
And other people that haven't attended universities, hospitals, really, it's quite an expensive bit of kit. So you've got to make do with what you've got.
Do you look at what their current diet is like at the moment, and then identify where their needs are to try and get them to where they need to be?
Yeah, absolutely. You need that. We usually ask before we get into a fight camp. If somebody comes to us, we would say, right, can we see a most honest and accurate representation of what you've been eating over the last 4 to 7 days? I think we would say, so we can see what a normal week would look like. And 9 times out of 10, they're not eating enough. They're not eating at the right time. So what we like to do with the information provided is get them to fill out a consultation form, give us the information that we're asking from them. If we need to go back to them to get more detail, then we can. And then we can formulate a nutrition, diet plan, fluid intake plan around what it is that we need them to kind of stick to over a certain time period. And then we can also keep track of the weight and create a weight trajectory to see exactly where we need them for each week, all the way up until the weigh-ins and post-weigh-ins as well. Because a lot of people think, oh, you make the weight, that's it. It's not. It's so important that everything's stuck to the book. We don't. It has to be, and mostly because of university ways, but it has to be to the point. We have to make sure, right, this is at this time, this is at another time. And again, the job isn't really done by making the weight. It's all the way up to the fight night itself.
Fight as well.
15 minutes before.
And then, so the first 4 weeks you're saying is typically fat loss, for argument's sake. So, in terms of the composition of what you're recommending they're eating, what are the things that you recommend in terms of the carbs, the protein, the fats? What kind of percentages are you talking about? And also, is there an issue with the timing of when you eat the food as well?
So there's some big things there. So when we come in with a recommendation, so we'll work out an estimated amount of calories that they need per day. You can do that via a general resting metabolic rate equation. We use that to gauge the amount of total calories they need. Once you've done that, all you need for that is you need age, height, weight, and your general activity levels.
Okay.
Once you've decided those, and there are calculators online to do this. Once you've found that, you need to take off about 400 to 500 calories. That's going to put you in that deficit. From that point, we've got our target calorie intake. Once we've got the target calorie intake, we'll break that down into the macronutrients that they need. You said about the proportions yourself, Carl. So instead of going for percentages, we go by grams per kilo of body weight. So we'll start with protein. So protein intake will go between 1.6 and 2 grams per kilo.
Sometimes even a little bit higher.
If needs be.
Yeah.
So I'd say for a general ballpark, 2 grams per kilo is going to be more than enough for most people. Work that out. So grams per kilo of your body weight. We'll then do the same with fats, and we'll aim for 1 gram per kilo of body weight. That's a little bit less, and then the rest of the calorie allowance will come from the carbohydrates, which is you'll take off the protein and the fat from the total daily calories, and you get your carbohydrate recommendation there.
But that being said, as well, in terms of calculating that way is something that we have used. There are other methods as well. So there's something called a metabolic analyzer that we do have as well, which again, essentially, without going into too much detail, calculates the oxygen consumption and generates a report and tells us exactly to the T how many calories you would burn. For that, it's about 20-30 minutes test.
Yes.
Is that really? I mean, it gives us it's gold standard. It's going back to that DEXA analysis again. This is how many calories you need for this particular scenario. So the analyzer can be used not just for a resting metabolic rate, but it can also be used in other situations, VO2 max test, sub-max test. It could be they use it for a boxing session, and we can gauge essentially what they would do for that particular workout instead of again leaving it to the calculations. Not the guesswork. There's a lot of calculation, but again, it's that accuracy, it's that fine margins, because these fine margins again equal long-term gain, and that's what we have seen in quite a lot of the athletes through these approaches.
So with this metabolic analysis, you can actually get them to spar or to fight and measure their calorific or how much they're burning off, or how many calories they need to actually achieve.
Well, yeah, for that session, would it be a spa?
That's the one limitation of these estimation equations. Is they don't take into consideration that somebody might have a faster metabolism or slower metabolism.
Right.
So between us, we had a disparity. So one had a faster, and one had a slower. I'm not going to say who.
I'm not going to guess either.
I don't know.
No, keep it impartial. But that way, we saw there was quite a big difference in the amount of calories. So this masters us the chance to go that extra level of accuracy.
Yeah.
Once you've got your calories, right, I like to see it as a pyramid. Once you've got your calorie intake, you can then work out your macros, which is your carbs, fats, and your proteins. From there, it's going back to what you were saying about timings. So that would be your third level of the pyramid. So you put your foundations in, your calories are right, your macros are right. You then need to go and work out, like, when am I going to have these foods?
Right.
So, let's take, for instance, let's say we've got an athlete who's training after work, which we have quite a lot, so a 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. period. You're training later in the evening, you want to have your fats towards the start of the day, as a way of helping you feel fuller for longer throughout the day. Fats take a little bit longer to digest. So when we're having the fats around training, it can make us feel a little bit sluggish. Maybe the meal feels a bit heavy on the stomach, and it's the last thing we want. So we want to prioritise fats towards the start of the day and keep them away from training. We'll break down breakfast. So breakfast, for instance, like that could be like overnight oats with some peanut butter. Peanut butter's a great one to go for. An omelette or scrambled eggs and a bagel can be a really, really good option there as well, which can have your fats and your proteins to keep that meal at the start of the day. Towards the middle of the day, it might be a case of getting some more carbohydrates in, because you're starting to load up the carbohydrates, maximise your muscle glycogen stores. Your glycogen is your storage of carbohydrates within the muscle. Once you maximise those, you're ready to go into the session. But that lunchtime might be a little bit higher fibre. You might have your couscous, you might have quinoa, stuff that's might take a little bit longer to digest, but
it's sustainable.
Exactly.
How to get them through the day, because some people have, for instance, some people might have university, some people might have quite strenuous laboured jobs. Like, it's important that we take all of that into consideration, because that will be the difference between a good session and a bad session, depending on the day that they're having.
How they filled up is everything.
Yeah.
Then when you're getting towards training, let's say you're 60 to 90 minutes out of training. That might be quite close for some people. You've got to work this out for yourself, whether it comes down to how far you need to eat away from training.
Yeah. Some fighters, they don't need. No. Sometimes we've got fighters that can just eat, for instance, a bagel, with some jam, some peanut butter, or straight in the gym, no problems at all. Where others need a little bit longer to adjust, depending on their gastrointestinal comfortability with how they've done it in the past.
But what you want to focus on there is going for your high glycemic index foods. They're the ones that are mainly made up of your simple sugars.
Yep. So
like as Connor said, bagel and jam. Your jams, your sugars. Your white bread is really easy to digest. Not going to sit heavy in the stomach. It's not a bagel. It could be a crumpet. It could be, my favourite is to go to a hot cross bun. Hot cross bun and honey is so good.
Can't go wrong.
And low fibre as well.
Low fibre, really good.
Yeah. Really as well. So again, they tie into that as well. Squares bars are a popular one before a session. Banana, ripe banana as well. A lot of it is essentially, these are the foods that you can have. These are the foods we can have at certain times. It is literally sometimes a bit nip and tuck around. Some fighters will go, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But some fighters will go, can I have it at this time because it suits me better? Yeah. Absolutely, as long as you're eating it and as long as you feel like you're going to get in the ring and it's not going to put you in a bad way. So it's around the athlete to a certain degree.
And it's interesting you mentioned the high glycemic index food. So is that to give them a spike of sugar to give them the energy to perform during that training session?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're also partnering that with, so it's not just pure high GI foods, because you've still got the bagel. And a little bit of peanut butter is okay.
I would say smooth as well. Again, keeping it all low fibre. So, and this is quite similar to how we would go about fight week as well. So this is where we would say to our athletes, right, when it comes to the acute strategies of getting that little bit more weight up, we'll bring in a low fibre approach. We'll bring in other strategies to kind of help that. But they also work in other areas of fight camp as well. So when it comes to the fight week, when we've already used certain foods during it, they're already used to having it, they're accustomed to it, and it's like, this is where you can go, right, well, this is what we've had before a session, but this is actually what we can also have in fight week as well. So they feel like they're not even dieting or cutting the weight because they're sticking to things that they are normal, nothing's really changed.
Then after the session, we're looking at trying to refuel, rehydrate. You know, they call it 4 hours of recovery, isn't it? Refuel, rehydrate, rest, and repair.
Yeah.
So with those, you're going to want to get high protein sourcing.
Increases MPS, also protein synthesis, which is again
to start the rebuilding process. We're thinking about carbohydrates as well. We want to get a good serving of carbohydrates in there. Pastas, your rice, potato, those sort of things are going to be really good there. And then also making sure you're rehydrating as well. So at least 500 mils of water, depending on what you're doing. Might be good to throw a little electrolyte tab in there. So we're coming up to summer. People are going to be sweating a lot more. Not at the moment. Maybe a little bit over the summer, but later on.
I think with the rehydration process, it does come down to as well the intensity of the session, because I think we've had instances where, if I don't know, for argument's sake, it's some gyms have different names for it, and they might have a morning where it's killer sprints, or they might have they call it different things. But if a session is we're looking at quite long in terms of 2 to 3 hours, that's where suggestions like carb gels would come into play, or liquid forms where they can get that fuel from as well.
Even just Lucozade Sport. Lucozade Sport is a little bit of a hack for just going into co-op and buying Lucozade Sport. It's got your sugars in that they're going to be needed and easily digested, and it's still coming with that water as well.
Fan favourites is definitely Lucozade and Spurs bars.
I mean, you mentioned the electrolyte tablets. I mean, my personal concern whenever I exercise is, are you going to take too much electrolytes? Are you going to take too little electrolytes? You know, or is your body just going to adapt to it? If you take a tablet and there's too much sodium in there, your body will adapt. Or too much potassium in there, your body will get rid of it. I mean,
and it's also listening to your body at the same time, because we say general rule of thumb: if you're thirsty, then drink. It's hard to really pinpoint essentially how many calories, how much fluid you would need throughout the day. We obviously have different recommendations for different athletes depending on their size, gender, etc. But when it comes down to the fluid intake, if you really, really wanted to go into the depth of the sodium loss during sessions or just throughout the day and recommended fluid intake, there are tests out there. But we
found that when looking at the research, there isn't a significant difference, or a huge difference between the composition of sweat. Not to make a big enough difference to tailor your approach too much. Your things like your electrolyte tabs. If you also have some electrolyte tabs and a little bit extra salt on food, you're going to be probably fine there with that.
Okay.
With that said, if you do have a little bit too much, then there are one-way processes that will be able to treat it.
Okay. All right. And then so that's your aiming to get the fat loss in the first 4 weeks. Then after that, what's a plan over the next couple of weeks?
So then you've got all your cards still. You've got your tricks that you want to apply. Once we've gone through the fat loss phase, we tend to go into what Connor mentioned earlier, and that would be low fibre. So we found that we can get roughly 1 to 2 kilos off from low fibre diets, low residue diets. It's essentially because those high fibre foods take a little bit longer to digest. can end up being in the body for a little bit longer.
Gut cleansing.
Gut cleansing. So essentially, the speed at which food passes through the body is a bit quicker. Might be going to the toilet a little bit more often. Yeah, being polite. Which means that you can clear the system of any excess residue, excess deposits, and that can help to lose a little bit of the weight.
Okay.
Then we've also got sodium reduction. Yeah. So we'll try and minimise sodium where we can within the body.
It's around 500.
Under 500 milligrams. I think it is. Yeah. Where that is enough to sustain your health, but it's not. It's going to minimise any water retention.
Okay.
So we'll be able to make sure that there's minimal subcutaneous water. Mm-hmm. So water that is in between the tissues. It can help to lose about half to 1 kilo, depending on whether the person's having a lot of salt or not. And what you can find is your dieters and put more salt on food.
Yeah, yes. And some athletes will want that more as well, whether they actually need it or they don't. We've seen that as well. And also there's reduction in carbohydrates as well. So depending again on what weight they're at, when you get to a fight week, the training's usually tapered. They're not doing much. We've now in a position where we've had the opportunity to be involved with events where there's media, there's interview obligations. So again, it can be quite mentally draining for an athlete, but in terms of what they're doing, it's again they're on their feet quite a lot. So you want to find a balance between taking the carbohydrates away you need, because again with the carbohydrates comes water as well.
Yep.
And then but them also not feeling lethargic and fatigued in any way. So sometimes we've been in a position where we go down as low as 50 gram carbohydrates
if we need to.
If we need to, but this is maybe be once.
This is where we're getting to the point that you maybe bring that in if you weren't at the right weight you wanted them to be.
Yeah, it's a slight little change.
So we're talking 10 days out here. 10 days out to a week out, you might be like, okay, we're not quite where we wanted to be. We missed our target for the final week, so we're going to bring you down to low carb for 4 or 5 days. We're trying to reduce liver and muscle glycogen, because those are those stores of carbohydrate in the body. This is always the intent of then refueling and replacing it once we get past the weight.
Yeah.
So it's maximising that, back to maximising that weight.
And like carrying on from what Matt said, if we're, for argument's sake, 10 days out, we're at a particular weight, but we want it, and we've been with them before, for argument's sake, we've done, like, let's say 2 or 3 camps with them. We know if we get them to that particular point, we know that 2 days out from weigh-ins, if they're around a particular weight, we know if we need to bring the sodium down, if we know if we need to bring carbohydrates down, we know if we need to maybe bring low fibre in 2 days out. We know that from prior data, that's what they need to make that particular weight as well.
After we've manipulated those variables, we've still got a few we can go into. One big one is water. So we were talking about reducing muscle glycogen, which will reduce in the water retention anyway. It's a long and similar process. So it could be that if the person's, let's say they're half a kilo off their weight that they need to be at on the day, you'd maybe look at halving their regular water intake, and that would be enough to see them continue the weight loss.
But if it's a bit more,
yeah, we have seen, haven't we?
Yeah, we've seen other athletes where, for argument's sake, and not just us in terms of who we've worked with. I've seen it with Smithies as well. Again, it comes back to that maximising that weight category. So what, for argument's sake, they'll be 5 days out. They'll start getting the athlete to drink. It's usually 100 millilitres per kilogram of body weight. So maths, not my strongest point. Let's say they're 80 kg. So what you do is you use the equation, around 8 litres of water per day. It sounds like a lot.
It is a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
their best friend will be the toilet, especially if they're not used to it. But what we would usually say with a strategy like this, if we're going into a fight camp where we think it would be necessary, is right. We need a period weeks away from a fight camp to try it to see essentially if it fits or works for them. So you'd have about 3 days of that maximum fluid intake, and then what we would do is we can cut that down on. So you'd have day 1, day 2, day 3, and then we would look to cut it down the day after that. And then what we would look at is a complete restriction when it comes to the weigh-in day itself.
Okay.
Because what we would,
about 15 millilitres per kilo. So you go from 100 millilitres per kilo down to 15.
And that's just for 24 hours then, that's all. Yeah.
So 24 hours, or it might be 24 hours and then up to the weigh-in. So maybe another 6 or 7 of that morning. The reason we do that is we're seeing an increased production of urine. So if we're regularly having that, and the body's adapted over a couple of 3-4 days to that, there's an increased production of urine. What you're then looking for is you then cut the water, and once you cut the water, you're still retaining that bodily process of urine production to again remove any subcutaneous water. That's essentially the idea and the theory there to help bring the weight down.
And we've seen it work firsthand. We were preparing for a weight class. It was a cruiserweight limit, but then they were fighting actually at a lower catch weight because within boxing there's certain rules, regulations from British Boxing Board of Control that say you have to be at a certain weight to fight at a certain category. So we were preparing for a completely different weight category, and we had to flip it to a new one. So it was essentially I think we were trying to make 91, and then we had to make 88 it was. And that was less than 2 days' notice. So that was when it was appropriate to go, right, let's use these acute weight strategies and see from there where we can go with.
So it was 3.1 kilos lost.
Wow.
Yeah.
In a very short space of time.
And all of it goes back on.
All of it goes back on. And the thing is, none of that is fat loss.
Okay, just fluids.
And that's the difference between those long-term fat loss strategies that you see and those acute weight loss strategies.
Yeah, because it's an unsustainable approach. It's essentially a way of us being able to go, right, this is what we can do, this is what we can strip you to, and then we've got enough time to refuel and put it all back on.
Okay. So, and he did. We come back to 91.
I think he was even higher.
It probably wasn't.
After the refuel, again, because even though, for argument's sake, we had to adapt and change what our plan was. But we like to stick to a plan. We know the athletes we work with, we know very well. We have a lot of data on them. We know exactly what they need at what time. So when we have to change something like that, it's not stressful.
I was stressed.
But
I can imagine it would be quite stressful.
But when we do it properly, when it's done properly, and the plans agreed, not much changes in terms of the post refuel. Maybe a little bit more emphasis electrolyte. I can't say the word. Lucozade or an electrolyte drink for the first 90 minutes, 2 hours, and then we would then bring back in carbohydrates, solid foods. To go from there. Again, that comes down to the preference and the athlete, but usually after a weigh-in, they love food.
And also, in terms of the water loading, I mean, are there some risks associated with giving them that much water in 3-4 days?
There are potential risks to hypernatremia.
Yeah.
If it's not done properly.
Hypernatremia is the essentially seriously low levels of sodium within an athlete. And we have had one example of where they started to go down the route of hypernatremia, and we were able to spot it before it got there. And we spotted that through that constant communication. So we're at a stage here within the fight camp where they are high risk strategies, especially the water loading. We spoke to the athlete, and he was like, I've got headaches, I'm feeling quite fatigued, I'm feeling really lethargic, haven't felt like this all camp, I don't quite understand what's happened. and after consulting, it was like, right, we've got to think about what changes you've made. And after consulting it, we definitely put it down to the water intake and the changes in salt. At that point, yeah, we do look to reduce the water intake. Okay. We can't be pushing that.
Well, I think with that instance as well, I think there was when you kind of look back and you assess, there's other reasons for why people may feel a certain way. But when there's indicators of certain things, that's when you go, right, increase this and do that. And I think within a couple of hours, it's like, oh no, I feel all right.
Yeah, we can't be honest, but it goes back to those how are you feeling out of 10?
Yeah.
So we asked him how you feeling out of 10, and he was like, I feel 5 out of 10. I feel rubbish, I feel sluggish.
And I suppose that it also highlights the need to work with people like yourself who know what you're doing and know what you're talking about with these high risk strategies, not to kind of undertake those on your own.
Here's some horrible stories, and again, like we're always learning on what we're doing in terms of especially combat sports. We've got quite a lot of experience in it now. The athletes that we've had the pleasure of working with, they've given us an opportunity to kind of showcase what we can do and the potential we can bring to them in terms of their performance and how to make weight properly. And like I said, a lot of these acute strategies that we've used were more probably towards the start of when we were doing it. But again, like you said, you grow, you adapt like fighters do, so they get better and better each fight. Every athlete we work with, we seem to be able to kind of utilise and find different strategies to that's for them well.
You learn about that athlete, you learn what works and what doesn't work. And then that really is separating it from the recommendations you might get in a research paper and real life. It's a big learning curve that we've both had. I've been a nutritionist myself for 4 years now, and we are with this. I've been working more in terms of general fat loss and muscle gain with clients, and this has provided a whole new perspective to those finer details. And how important it is to test and trial these with athletes first. And you can optimize it, but it does take that time and that trust.
Yeah. Oh, the trust is massive. The trust is massive. You can work with somebody for a full camp, and then if ultimately if they feel they've benefited and got better as a result, they will stay with you and continue that. But a lot of it is again, it comes down to, especially at the start of when you're doing it, comes down to learning, adapting, and understanding truly what it is you need to do as a performance nutrition. Making sure if there's a performance nutritionist out there that says they haven't made a mistake, then but it's those mistakes that again kind of help you grow. And I mean, it's been amazing the last year. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Some of the things we've been involved in, some of the opportunities we've had, and the athletes we get to work with. I mean, I haven't got a bad thing to say about any single one of them. Some of the most hard-working, dedicated, talented people that I've been fortunate to meet, and you meet some incredible people along the way as well. Brilliant.
I mean, just a question on any supplements. Do you recommend any supplements during a training camp at all? Things like caffeine, creatine, nitrates, that kind of stuff, or not?
Yeah, where do you want to start? We'll start with the easy one. So I wouldn't even call whey protein a supplement. We look at it from our perspective as a convenient high protein food choice. Because we're not looking at the micronutrients there. We're looking at a convenient way to get lots of macronutrients.
Yeah.
So it's another convenient, sweet protein choice. But we always make sure that anything like that is coming from an informed sport background. So where everything's batch tested and each individual batch is tested for any contamination that might come from the manufacturers. When you then look into other supplement areas where you're looking to gain that extra couple of percent, big one we use at the moment, beta-alanine. So we use that a lot with fighters. A lot of people might know it as something that's used within pre-workout to give you that tingles. Paresthesia. You don't actually want the tingles. Tingles isn't a good thing. It's putting a lot of pre-workouts just for the stimulation that you get those tingles. That's essentially the nerves telling you have too much of the supplement.
Okay.
Beta-alanine is converted into carnosine, and it sits within the muscle. And once it sits within the muscle, it produces a more alkaline environment in the muscle. So as we work and as we train, we get more fatigued and we produce more lactate, lactic acid, and that starts to accumulate more, making it a more acidic environment. That's when we feel the fatigue.
Yes.
If you start your training at a more alkaline level, you can then transition through that neutral phase for a little bit longer, so you're prolonging your fatigue.
Right.
The way you supplement with it accurately is we're looking for at least 4 doses of 1.6 or 1.5, but in the loading phase, 1.5 grams.
The loading phase, again, research would probably say 4 to 6 weeks, but we tend to say 6 weeks.
That's it.
6 weeks.
Staying at 6 weeks, and it's a long-term supplement, and you shouldn't feel those tingles. You might feel them at first. You might feel a few tingles because it's a new supplement in the body, but your body should adapt to it. And then after that 6-week period, you can go for a maximum of about 20 weeks at just a maintenance dose, 1 to 2 grams per day, and that would just keep those carnosine levels, the muscle carnosine levels, topped up in the body. So
and then after 20 weeks, you should stop that supplement, or
yes,
yeah,
all supplements realistically should have a cycle phase.
And does that include whey protein as well? Should be cycled.
We're not classing whey protein in as a supplement.
Fair enough.
That's why.
But there's other proteins that we would, like casein protein.
Yeah, casein protein is a good option.
So you coming back to the timing of particular supplements as well. So when it comes to the whey protein, a lot of our athletes, for instance, they tend to like overnight oats with the whey protein within that to get the protein up in the morning. Especially some of our bigger athletes, higher weight class athletes, sometimes they can find it or have found it hard to get their protein intake to a certain level of where it should be. So a good starting point would be, it could be an oat smoothie, it could be an overnight oats mixed in all together. You can have a bit of peanut butter. There's so many different ways that you can increase that.
And you mentioned overnight oats. Is that oats that you soak overnight and eat the next day?
Yeah, and then you'd have for breakfast. Yeah, so that's it. So I don't know how to explain that.
No, that's all good.
And then with the casein protein, we'd be looking to have that towards the evening, and that could be something like a pre-bed. It could be to go Rush Krispies, what we call Krispies, isn't it? So we're being told. And that again, it's a slow digested protein, so it will help again, especially through some of these athletes training between 1 and 3 times a day. It helps again, especially when it comes to recovery through the night. There's a lot of benefits to having the casein protein towards that last minute of the day.
You're trying to minimise catabolism.
Yeah.
So you've got
muscle breakdown.
Muscle breakdown. We want to try and minimise that, and that's what casein protein is doing in terms of it's slower to digest, which means you'll get a more sustained release of protein. So you get a more sustained protein synthesis response.
And even if, for argument's sake, some athletes don't really like to take too much in terms of like whey protein, casein protein, beta. Some of them like a more natural kind of alternative. So that's where you're looking at dairy products, for instance, like yogurt, like a protein. It could be a protein yogurt, but it could just be a normal Greek yogurt as well. And then we would say again, you've got to think about gastrointestinal comfortability through the night.
Yeah.
It's trying to find a way for them to have something that's going to be consistent, kept to a routine, and then they can have it over a fight camp. So the supplementation strategies do differ depending on the time of the camp, the kind of overall goals that the athlete might have or the coaching team might have. and the supplements make them in at different parts of the day, depending on what it is we're trying to focus on in terms of, i.e., recovery when it comes to the casein and reducing that muscle breakdown for the night.
On recovery as well, another supplement we use specifically within tournaments with athletes is something like a cherry active.
So yeah.
So it's essentially high in antioxidants. It's an antioxidant supplement. We're trying to reduce inflammation.
Pomegranate juice as well is another one. Just a natural juice again, high in antioxidants, polyphenols, all really good anti-inflammatory properties as well.
Okay. By reducing inflammation, we're helping to start the recovery process in between fights, essentially. So we wouldn't use that in a 5-camp row.
Okay.
Because you're trying to work out the balance between focusing on the athlete's recovery or adaptation. So when you're in a fight camp, you want to have that stimulus to grow and adapt. So you don't want to have it at that point. You only want to have it in between fights if you were trying to recover in a tournament.
Right.
So if you, the amateur fighters,
that focus has shifted from I don't want to grow my muscle to that point. I don't want to become more powerful and quicker at that point. I just want to be ready 100% for the next fight.
Right.
So we're sacrificing adaptations, but we're prioritising recovery, which is going to make you feel better in the short term for that next fight. So that's a very particular one.
And then supplements for general health. I mean, the question that often goes through my mind is, if these guys have been training for 6 weeks and they catch a cold 2 days before they fight, is there anything that you would recommend people would take to make sure that they just stay physically well, leading up to a fight?
Big one for our guys at the moment is vitamin D.
Yeah.
Vitamin D is huge. That's a foundation supplement that we ask everyone to have.
Everything to bone health and immune function. It's a big one. The multivitamins. We obviously, in terms of the diet that we give them to go away with and stick to, they're going to be getting essentially most of what they need through that. But there are, again, other vitamins, minerals that certain people could be deficient in and naturally are. In terms of where we're located in England, we don't see much sun. And again, vitamin D is quite a big one at the moment that we tend to kind of establish and use with our athletes. There's also other supplements, omega-3.
Yep.
So we use
fish oils.
Yeah, we use that. Most of them do use that anyway.
That also depends.
Old wines, isn't it?
It also depends on preference, really. Yeah, because if you can get that in through food.
Yeah.
Get it in through food. Some people don't like the fishy foods, so that's when an omega-3 might be a good option. Some fish oil, just one to two capsules start of the day,
and then one more.
Potentially one more if needs be.
Yeah.
The day. Vitamin D and multivitamins. And I've got to be honest, it sounds like a plug, but I'd highly recommend the one from Nutrition X. When it comes to your multivitamin, we can. I wish.
Yeah.
So, with the reason for that is you can tend to find ones like, let's say, like protein, for instance, that have a higher amount of some of the cheaper minerals in them. So, let's say, for instance, I've seen they have like 200 to 300% more vitamin C than you actually need to fill out the capsule.
Right.
And then it's lower in things like your iron. So it's like 60%, 70% of the iron you need. Like, well, what's going on there? They're essentially, you want to cover all your bases. And Nutrition X will give you 100% of everything you need in every capsule. And that's the reason why we go to them.
They're approved as well. They're Informed Sport tested, which again is a huge one with any athlete. Ultimately, if an athlete doesn't want to, then it's completely up to them. But I'd say all the athletes we're working with, drug testing is a thing, and we want to make sure that our athletes are completely free and clean and have no worry in the world about that. And that's something where we we keep it again really concise with the information that we get from the supplementation that we use. We keep the batch numbers. We keep track of a loading phase or a maintenance phase. It's really important that we keep on top of these things because it is a really serious thing, especially in boxing.
And you can end up having a list of 6 or 7, and you're like, well, what am I taking? And how many am I putting down? So, in terms of vitamin D as well, I definitely look to cycle that in terms of you've had a lower dose over the summer months.
And then you increase it again, obviously, towards the winter times.
Yeah.
And again, depending on the individual, like you can have some people that come and go. I've had blood tests. I've got a bit of a D deficiency, and they're already known for that. And then it's about again, we've seen it where they're taking vitamin D, but just not enough. And then by going to those, they feel so much better as a result.
And a lot of your over-the-counter Holland and Barrett style supplements aren't going to contain the right strength. They're not high strength. No. For instance, we knew somebody was taking everything's measured in international units. 200. 200. So taking 200 international units probably should have been 10 times that amount.
Wow.
So 2,500 IU is what we then recommended.
And that's just for the summer dose?
Yeah. Winter dose, upwards, maximum, I'd say 4,000 IU. Absolutely.
Wow, okay.
A day.
But that depends, again, on the situation and the person.
And a big one is skin colour and ethnicity. If your origins are from a lower latitude, if you're in a country like we are, where in November to March you barely see the sun, you're going to be
thieving a little bit.
Well, yeah, maybe. We're all living inside a lot. We're all
quite
home.
Yeah.
Not seeing the sun as much.
Basically, when we get 1 month of summer a year, that's all we get.
Yeah.
So unless holidays and I don't know, there's a really good year where we see a lot more. Even then, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's a nice stable to have for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
That means everyone and anyone.
And this is the beauty of what we do, Karam, because when it comes to each athlete we work with, like we mentioned supplementation strategy, we're talking about vitamin D, for instance, with some of the with one of the female boxers we work with. One of the big ones is iron. Yeah. Making sure that we're getting enough iron into the diet as well. So there's so many different kind of angles you can go off with these supplements, and it all comes down to where we eventually sit down and go, right, what's best? What has worked if we worked with them before? What hasn't? If they're new, well, let's do this, let's do that. So we tend to like to have a certain amount of time before a camp, but again, it's about adapting as well, going back onto that.
And back to the communication.
Yeah.
Do you feel better after you've had the supplement?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're more energized? Do you feel less fatigued throughout the day? And that's where the out of 10s come in again. And we can start to categorize, that actually did work.
Yeah.
And then so we reached the point where we've done the weigh-in, we've made weight, and then in that post-weigh-in period, what happens then?
Let them have a Mackey's.
Yeah, Mackey's, Burger King. Hot noodles, my favourite.
After
the finest foods.
This is what I was saying earlier with regards to, like, it's not just about making the weight, it's then the nutrition after.
Yes.
I could count, I probably need both hands to count how many different people have said, oh, can I go and get a Nando's, or can I go and get this after the weigh-in? It's like, no, but now we've got to that point where, again, because that many people have asked us about it, we look at that now. I mean, I used to work at Nando's, so I know the menu a little bit, but what we do is we kind of utilise that. That's one of the things mentally. If they want that after, then we need to adapt something from that menu for them. So we've got things that they can have, like we ask for the menus, we ask for ways of kind of giving them what they want, but within our grounds, if that makes sense. So
Absolutely,
a couple of hours after the weigh-in, we're looking at fluid
getting some electrolytes in, because you've just lost, you have lost minerals as well.
Yeah.
Especially if with some of the acute strategy there is a little bit of a run needed to get that last bit of water out. getting sweating. Also, Lucozade Sport again.
Gatorade as well is a good one.
Just try to refill all the glycogen, so the storage of carbohydrates in the muscle we've just lost.
Yep.
And then about 90 minutes, 2 hours, that's when you start introducing the foods. And we're keeping it low fiber still, so we're keeping it high glycemic carbohydrates, keeping it low fiber. We're maximising those stores, keeping moderate protein as well. But we want to avoid things like anything processed, anything fatty, anything high fiber. We want to keep those things out. We want to make sure that, again, quickly digestible options are there. And we're just, again, stacking up those stores, making sure that they go into that fortnight 100% to kind of do what they need to do.
That's the main reason for keeping it low fiber is you've got them feeling light on their feet. Why would you want to run that?
Yeah.
And you don't want to run that risk again of it feeling heavy and
sluggish.
And that's why, again, delving even deeper into what we do after they win and they've done what they needed to do. Post victory, what we would say is, right, the next day we're going to keep it low fiber, but what we'll do is towards the end of that day we'll start introducing a little bit of fiber and then building them back up to that, because some people just naturally are a little bit more sensitive that way, and it's better to do it properly and find that instead of finding out the hard way. So,
and also I suppose even though you've won the fight and you've got through that, there's still forward thinking about what's going to happen in the next few weeks in the next fight. I mean, you see the photos of some boxers who completely yo-yo between fights, and I can't imagine that's going to be good in the long term, to be honest. But
there was a study about that, and there is an increased risk of potential obesity long term when you do yo-yo like that. Essentially, it does. Every time that you do it, it's going to be harder to get down to that weight the next time you do it. You are a little bit of metabolic damage or something.
Yeah, but also as well, another thing is age. Yeah. Some of the people we're working with, they're at that age where they're still, we'd say man strength, they're still filling into that, that prime finished article. So it can be harder, but sometimes, again, if other idea, like again, if the fighter or the trainer wants to fight a particular way, there's so many other factors that can come in. And this is why I love it so much. It's just so many different avenues, so many different ways of being able to go into a fight and doing things a particular way. I mean, we've got fighters, I'm not going to mention any names, but they don't like, for instance, any fruit. So you're thinking straight away, vitamins and I do love a little challenge like that. And when you work with the athlete long enough, you find ways of utilising other
ways of getting
it in.
So the challenges of the job, I suppose, isn't it? And then I think it's individualising all your knowledge and putting it in that individual and dealing with them as a human being, because not everyone is completely built to go, I will eat this, this, and this because this is what's good for me. Because people like stuff that's bad for them.
Yeah, my favourite is when the athletes, like all the athletes, fortunately, they are very honest, and we like to keep, because the last thing you don't want, again, it comes in that trust, where weight might be lied about. We've had people come to us and say, oh, they've said, oh, I weighed this, but they never actually did. So when it comes to a fight week, how are you supposed to work a miracle from that? So what we say is we kind of, you have to be real, you have to be honest, you have to be like, this is us, this is what we're about, this is what we want to do. We do this because we want to see fighters like yourself progress and grow. So when it comes to that, like the human to human kind of interaction, you've got to be an honest and straight to the point as possible. So, for instance, if at the start of the camp, I don't know, they've got particular worries or particular things that they do want to focus on, then we take that into consideration and we'll try and focus around that. But ultimately, we want them to go, right, you come to us, we're going to do the job for you. This is something you don't need to worry about. You just need to stick by us. And if they're not happy with certain things, you just adapt it. It's simple as that. Simple as that. If you want to add anything to that? No, great.
Brilliant. Well, listen, guys, I think that's brilliant. To be honest, I think I've learned a lot today. Thank you for your time.
Yourself,
say again.
So you can have a fight yourself.
I may do. I've got a punch bag set up now, so I may be topping you guys up for a bit of nutrition advice. A new career.
You're going to see he's going to put this bit out in the.
No chance.